that every director is bound by certain laws, and the matter of conflict of interest exists with every director in every company around the country. We only have to look at some of the boards that our directors on the port sit on, and it's quite possible there are times when they find that that is a conflict, and they are required by law to declare it. Is that the state?
It's called actively managing your conflict.
And that is actually practice that's laid down by company law.
And the repercussions are far greater than an SOI of this council, to be blunt. Any other questions? Councillor Curtin, you had a...
Your response to the mayoral letters has been deemed satisfactory by the recipients of the letter, the senders of the letter.
Is that one key point? No, that was my question.
Mr. Chairman.
They're wholly satisfied with your reply.
The fact of the matter is we're still working through these issues, Councillor, and they are happy with that because they are being addressed.
Mr. Chair, just on your point about, or Councillor Scott's point about directors' conflicts of interest being, legislated for, etc. I mean, wouldn't that apply to every single director, whether they're councillor directors or independent directors or what? So why? And given this is HBRIC's statement of intent, I don't see why can't we just have
perhaps I could help Councillor
directors being their conflicts being looked at.
Perhaps I could help. I mean, the conflicts of interest requirements and the legislation and the practice that occurs at board meetings is relevant to the business of that board on that day and on that agenda, if necessary. What this conflict of interest paper is referring to is outside of the board. It's a conflict, potential perceived conflict between the business of the board and the decision making of council. So that's why it's being treated separately. There are already processes in place to deal with the first, the intra-board business. But when you look at the discussions, the letters from the mayors, etc., that have come through, those are based on the perceived conflict between the three councillors on the board and their role as directors and their roles as councillors. Yeah. So that's the need for the clarification.
In that case, that point 6.2, it doesn't need to be an HBRIC statement of intent because it's a council matter. It's nothing to do with HBRIC. Chief Executive's nodding. Thank you.
Can I just make a suggestion that might
so can we remove it then?
Reach some or help to satisfy people. In that subsidiary company paragraph, leave the first sentence, all subsidiary companies are required to submit annual statements of intent to HBRIC Limited, which will evaluate them and suggest changes as considered necessary before finalisation by the company. After that, say, in the event of a new subsidiary company being established, the first statement of intent of the subsidiary company will be referred to the council for comment, and then subsequently, if any material changes are proposed by subsidiaries, HBRIC will consult. So what that would mean is Councillor Curtin's suggestion that first time up, the statement of intent of the new subsidiary company would be referred to the council, and then after that, any material changes would be referred to the council.
That's one view, and which is good, but Councillor Curtin also had a view, which I'm not sure if they're that far apart, but
no, as it transpired, I've been trying to get some feedback on this very similar transaction, and all I'm suggesting, and it comes very close to what Councillor Dix is suggesting, but what it does is simply, and goes to Councillor Scott's position as well, which I think is quite valid, the key word is consult. So what I'm suggesting in an alternative is that each annual statement of intent is provided to the council for consultation, and so it's provided annually, and if any material changes are made, and it's simply a consultation. There's little more than that, so that we're fully informed about that. And I think that's what's intended with the word consult in that paragraph.
But again, remember, outside of this, there is that issue of a business case being needed to be proved to the council before investment takes place.
All right. Well, I mean, I'm not going to get hooked up if there's a consensus on receiving it in the first instance. Well, that's fine. I'm happy with that.
I think
What about safeguards at the end of the day?
First time round should be adequate, as long as if any material changes are subsequently proposed, we know about them.
And in reply to Councillor Remerswell's point, she's right. 6.2 is actually not required. We could take it out.
Or if we want to deal with it, we deal with that through our council process, not through HBRIC process.
Yeah, and that doesn't need to be reflected here, but it's something we need to get onto ASAP to follow Councillor Gilbertson's view. So I think there is a solution in the middle of all that. Yeah.
Where's 6.2?
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got that one change. Can we? Sorry.
If we finish with this thing, can I ask something else? Or
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, move on to the next point.
thanks.
Have we settled that? So the while she's putting that up on the board.
Is it going as an additional recommendation?
No, it's going to be part of a change to this.
Well, I don't have the ability to change their SOI. It has to go back to the board.
Yeah, well, that's right. But we need to. That's
This wording? Yeah.
that's our job today, to tell them that we actually just want to. Is it Ellen's wording? Have you got that written down? Bring it over, perhaps. Or... Anyway, Councillor Remerswell, you had another point?
This is 5.2 on that first page. And I just need to understand those words correctly, what that actually means, which I just wonder if that can be explained. Promote sustainable business practices, please.
Mr. Chairman, can I add, this is a change that was already debated by council and taken back to the company and has been incorporated.
Yeah, exactly, but Councillor Remerswell would just like to understand its meaning, and that's fine. We can repeat
It's
that.
not clear to me from those words.
Okay.
And we have talked about this before, and that's why I'm bringing it up now, again, because that's why I brought it up in the first place.
Mr. Caldwell? 5.2.
5.2 was in the draft SOI presented in February an objective in itself. There was debate from the councillors that this should be incorporated into this objective, and it was documented by the chairman of HBRIC. I cannot recall the actual discussion that took place around that.
I think the issue, perhaps I can help, but I know what councillor you're getting at, is the word sustainable has so many meanings, actually. I think if you take the intent of that entire sentence, then it notes against the stated economic, environmental, and social performance objectives, which is if I've got the right paragraph, have I? Yeah. Against relevant benchmarks to ensure they have proper governance procedures in place and promote sustainable business practices. Well, I think that's a reasonably holistic statement, because it explicitly covers the dimensions of sustainability, albeit those values, and equally it can turn around and then look at, when one definition of sustainable business practice, you've got a business at the end of it all that can sustain itself. So I think the wording's intended to cover all of that, really. Yep.
But you can have one at the expense of the other. I mean, I just think it needs to be clear exactly what we're talking about, because they don't mean the same thing.
No, but the point is taking, if you follow through Councillor Curtin's point about reviewing of SOI of a subsidiary, then it's the total SOI that would give validation and clarity to those sorts of issues. That's where you would focus. I mean, I think it would be much more productive to focus on the SOI in totality than try to endlessly iterate this particular sentence.
If we go to the SOI, which was changed at the time to reflect this, it actually says, monitor the performance of each subsidiary and associated company against their stated economic, environmental and social performance objectives and against relevant benchmarks, ensure they have proper governance procedures in place and promote sustainable business practices. And it has to be taken in its entirety.
Thank you. Okay, any other points?
Questions or points?
Or questions or points you want to explore? Or are we debating a question?
So on that point, is it possible just to get, if you put sustainable in quote marks, then it means, you know, sustainability kind of thing, as opposed to, is that what the intention is?
No, I think the intention is that the measure is the values, i.e. economic, environmental, and social, as well as ultimately is it a viable business in totality. I mean, directors have got a fiduciary duty to ensure that a company's solvent, for example.
Well, and I mean, it would be better to use a word other than sustainable then, I think, because that is
And sustainable has many meanings.
yeah,
Councillor.
and it's not clear.
We've
It's
debated this many times.
too confusing. I mean,
I think it's very clear. And it'll come down to the vote on how clear it is at the end of the day. Councillor Curtin. We're getting close. Are you happy to move? You're happy to move? We have a seconder.
Perhaps if I specify, I'm suggesting we move 1, 2 and 3 of the paper with the addition of approves HBRIC Limited's submitted statement of intent with the council's amendments and notes, etc. So the addition of the words with the council's amendment, is that sufficient to capture?
The challenge, though, and I'll throw it over to Mr. Caldwell before I take a seconder, is this then has to go, it's a negotiation at the end of the day, it then has to go back to HBRIC, which is meeting in a few weeks' time,
That's correct.
for them to say, we agree with you, and then we make the final
Yes, they'll have to come back to council in
Yeah.
June.
in June. So it's got to go through one more iteration, okay? So do we need to put in your piece?
Do you need to add that?
We don't.
Would we only need to come back to council if the board decide not to accept?
Oh, I see what you're saying. If they accept that the changes, then it stands.
deal.
Is that what you mean?
It'll be official.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So your words were in effect to that?
To add in after the word statement of intent with the council's amendment.
Okay,
And notes that,
okay, great. Seconder for that? Happy to second it, Councillor Dick, wish to speak?
I think it's self-explanatory and Councillor Dick's wording appeals to me. I think it captures that. All I had intended in that area was to make sure of that.
I think I expect that the board will accept this proposed change, and the overriding objective, I believe, of the board and this council is for there to be a good, productive, and trusting working relationship between HBRIC and the council. And we've had a couple of little hiccups, but I think we're past that.
Thank you, Councillor Gilbertson.
I think there's a huge issue here that we haven't addressed and we're not addressing, which is the unanimous view of our fellow councillors that we're making a big mistake and that we haven't addressed the issues. And therefore, that opens a possibility of an election being run on those issues and the dam falling over on that. We can talk till the cows come home about legality and the issues there. Yes, I think the fact, what you're saying by saying that the interim board will continue for another 12 months is just basically thumbing your nose at those two councils and saying get stuffed, and that will have an interesting reaction. HBRIC preparing a report, blah, 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 will tell us absolutely nothing we don't already know. It will just pour oil on the flames, I'd say. The answer on this to me is quite straightforward. We sort of touched on it a while back. I believe that the 3 councillor members of the board should resign. I think the 2 consultants, whatever you like to call them, should be put on the board. And I think that there should be a resolution, which we haven't even discussed, about the 2 chief executives we have at this meeting at the moment, one of them being on the board of the chief executive of HBRIC. There's a huge issue there which is demonstrated by that letter, and we haven't even looked at that. So I think there's a fundamental flaw in the statement of corporate intent, and it's not going to go away. And I think it was quite dangerous because that could trigger a very severe reaction. And the most important thing in this issue, to me, is building that dam and getting the economy of Hawke's Bay going. And this is basically just putting a big block in the middle of the road in front of it, which we don't need to do. This could be solved very simply and logically. And if we don't do that, I think we're in trouble ahead. So I reckon it's foolish in the extreme not to address that issue now. You guys are quite happy to let this lie for another 12 months, so time will tell.
I'll take an opportunity to speak there. Most of that needs refuting on the basis that the Constitution's the place to have that ultimate discussion. But before we get too far into this, the mayors and myself have agreed, I haven't spoken to all their councillors, I've spoken to a few of them, that there is time to remedy this. It will be remedied well before the final term of this interim board. It has to be, quite simply. The Office of the Auditor General has told us that the conflict issue, there are processes in place to deal with it. First point. Second point, I've instructed our auditors to look at all our processes in relation to this relationship. Another very strong independent set of eyes to have a look at it. Third point, as a council, to date, we have not had an opportunity to discuss this. I am of the view, and I appreciate Councillor Remerswell's points, that she stuck to her guns, and actually, ultimately, I think she's correct. It's our issue to deal with, not HBRIC's. And on that basis, in the next week or two, I suggest we do get together and we put these things on the table and let's have a discussion. So I take your point, Councillor, and I'm not trying to refute or dim your passion for it. You are correct in the fact that the mayors and their councils have a different view at this stage, and they're asking us to explain how we're going to deal with this stuff. My answer to them is it's in train. There is a variety of mechanisms looking at it. I'm taking advice from all over the place, and ultimately it will be a decision of this council how we deal with that. So there you go.